Welcome to the Personal Podcast, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. This time on the show, I am really happy to introduce Hannah Harvey. Hannah is author of this wonderful book, How to Divorce Sober, podcaster and award-winning blogger at her site hannahharvey.uk. Hannah, what sort of substances were you addicted to?
Well, it was mostly alcohol. But at times it would dabble into things like cocaine.
And how did you get introduced to those sorts of substances? I mean, alcohol is quite a common one.
Yeah, so alcohol was like the same as everybody else, more or less. And certainly in the early noughties, it became much more of a thing. I think I felt quite like I didn't believe necessarily in myself, but I didn't know it. So I was leaning quite heavily on the free bar that was available. I was in the civil engineering industry at the time, not a lot of females around. And I felt a little bit like I was being brought along because I was a girl. And so I think that my love affair with alcohol really started then because I was not feeling good enough. And then later on, I'd kind of skipped drugs entirely. I just didn't meet anybody that was into it at university or at school. So it was when I met some friends and my then husband kind of in my late 20s, so around that kind of time.
I can relate to what you're saying about using alcohol as almost like a crutch socially. I was very shy when I first started out in my career, and especially in PR, it's kind of what you did, especially at events, and it just helped me just relax a little bit and help conversation flow. And you know, it's a bad thing really. I should have learned how to do it without it, and obviously I have now, but it's kind of just placed in front of us, isn't it, in these work situations. Yeah. So how bad did it get at its worst?
I think it's once I'd stopped going to these things, and then it becomes a kind of it's a Monday or a Tuesday night and you've had a bad day and you'll have a glass of wine, or it just becomes habitual. You have a glass of wine in the evening, then that becomes a bottle of wine, and then it becomes everything that's in the house once you've started. I had that kind of insatiable relationship with it where there was never enough. And it just got to a point where it was constantly on my mind, like, when am I going to drink? Okay, I'm going to not drink this week, and then you end up drinking anyway. And
yeah, because you're so focused on not. Were you at the stage where you were drinking like a bottle of wine an evening?
Yeah, it would either be like a bottle of wine to myself or with my husband. But it could easily have spiraled into whatever else was in the house. And then waking up in the morning and being like, why do I feel so bad? Oh, yes, I remember now.
Even on a school morning.
On a school morning, exactly.
Oh, my goodness. How did you get hangovers? Yeah,
they were horrific.
Oh, bless you. How did you cope? And was almost then drinking the answer to the problem?
Well, exactly. It's hair of the dog, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the Bloody Mary was created literally.
Oh, really?
I think so, to like solve hangovers. It's the kind of drink that people think is an acceptable one in the morning.
Well, true, yes. And, you know, did people notice at work?
Well, I think by the time it got a lot, I was a stay-at-home mum.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So
did you turn to alcohol more then?
I think so. I think there was a lot of different things going on. There was a lot of pressure on my husband at the time. I'd stepped back from the blogging side of things, and I think I was just bored and kind of surrounded by, there was a bit of a mummy culture around me of maybe having boozy lunches or, I can't even blame that. I would just be like, I'm bored. What shall I do to fill this feeling that I'm not living up to my potential?
Okay, you think that's what it was about?
Yeah, and it sounds really sad because there were lots of lovely moments as being a mum, and I've got friends who relish and absolutely get so much joy out of being a stay-at-home mum. But there was something for me that it just wasn't my calling.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've got friends that absolutely love it, friends that needed to get back to work, friends that have quite honestly said that they needed to drink a little bit more to get through it, you know, just because, you know, there's late nights. I absolutely loved it, but there's elements of it that's monotonous when you've got a newborn where it's that routine continually.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was working on my phone. That was almost like my drug to get through it. But it's a very difficult experience and difficult time for people in many different ways. So what made you decide that you wanted to get sober?
Do you know, I mean, I've obviously thought about this quite a lot because of the book, but I recall in my, like, I was living in Birmingham at the time, and I was in my late teens, and you could go to a club called Snobs in the middle of Birmingham with your fake ID, and there were nights when it was like 50p for a double, like a double vodka or something. And I remember going out then and choosing not to drink, even though it was so cheap. Yeah. So I'm like, there's always been a bit of me that has loved this idea of being sober and not needing that. Obviously that disappeared somewhere along the line, but it was still in the back of my mind of, this thing is controlling me and I don't really like it. And is there a way that I can live my life without it? There was a lot of pressure socially for me not to do that. And then one day I was on Pinterest and I was searching for something else. And then this article came up on Pinterest, which is like a weird place to find things, but people search on it all the time, right?
Yeah.
And it was called 3 of the most common fears that people have as to why they stop drinking, something like that. Okay. So I was like, I wonder what this is about. And then she literally listed all 3 of my main fears, which were things like, I'm going to end up with no friends. I'll basically be sat in the house all on my own because sober people do nothing. Because I was like, what do people who don't drink do anyway? And then one other, which I can't remember, but I read the article and I was like, so it is possible. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it, which will sound crazy to people who have control over their drinking, but I just couldn't understand it at all. And then to see it modeled so clearly, I was like, there's something in this. And then the next morning, we'd been out the night before. I drank a whole bottle of tequila to myself, more or less. Don't remember getting home. And in the morning I was like, I'm done. I'm done. I don't want to do this ever again. And I literally spent 3 days when I wasn't looking after anybody or doing the house related things, reading a book called Control Alcohol by Annie Grace. And that was it.
My goodness. Like, when you were drinking that tequila, did you know that this was going to be your last drink?
No. But just in the morning, I was like, no, we're done. Was
it quite common to polish off a full bottle of a spirit?
Well, we were out with loads of people, so everybody was drinking a lot that night. So no, I don't think it was that common. That was like quite a big night.
Big occasion.
Yeah.
I mean, and this says a lot, and probably says a lot negatively about me, but I'm ashamed to say I'm also quite proud that you could drink a full bottle. Like,
thank you.
You must have a strong
tolerance.
I
had that too. I was like, I can really put it back and it won't affect me in the same way, but
I shouldn't be. You know, I'm ashamed to admit that. It's almost like social conditioning, isn't it? You know, through uni, through like, I guess towards the end of sixth form, it was all about how much you could drink.
Yeah, I'm not a lightweight.
Yeah, you almost gain credibility and social stature through your drinking abilities, which, you know, is so wrong. And I think things are changing. It seems to be a little bit more about coffee culture now, or maybe it has moved on to more drugs. I don't know.
Yeah, but I don't know.
It's just like a really bad foundation, isn't it? Especially if people are using it as crutches to overcome their insecurities. It's just, and then alcohol addiction is one of the only addictions almost when people declare I'm going to stop drinking, people encourage them to do it. You know, they don't do that with smoking, or I don't think anyway, or other drugs or any other problems that people have. It's just very strange. Society's almost addiction to alcohol.
I wonder though, because, you know, you can have addiction to coffee or sugar or anything like that. Like I've pretty much realized I need to give up most things because I don't have an ability to moderate.
Yes.
But if I say I don't want any cake, I will feel guilty about it. you know, if you're at a party or a birthday party or something, I'm like, oh no, I don't want any. But I will inwardly be like, God, you're so rude.
Oh, really?
Like, just eat the cake. And I'm like, I can't. The other side of me is going, you can't eat the cake because you will go home and eat everything else.
Yeah, the psychological trauma of like the cake being offered, because I mean that tongue in cheek, I'm gluten free. So my worry when I'm offered cake is that I'm being rude to them, saying I can't have it.
Yeah.
And they think I'm creating issues. You know, all these things that go through our head over something simple like being offered cake. But I can agree, I can relate to that in terms of I get quite easily addicted to things like sugar. Like what you're saying, if I have one sweet, it turns into 10 packets of sweets.
Yeah, I'm like, I may as well just have the lot.
Yeah, may as well. So I'm quite all or nothing.
Yeah.
I became like that with alcohol. I used to drink a lot at university and, you know, early career when I left university. But then, like you, some days I would just be like, no, I'm not having any of it, because I knew if I had one, it would lead to 2 and 3. And, you know, I wasn't addicted or anything like that. But it's just binge drinking. I was a binge drinker.
Yeah. And for me, I'm like, if you do anything that you would rather you didn't, that's more or less an addiction in itself.
Yeah.
So anything that you kind of consider a negative thing and you're like, I'm not going to do that anymore, and then you do it, makes me go, what kind of control has that got over me? Or is it I need to look inwardly and check in on myself as to why I'm leaning on these things so much?
Yeah, you sound so self-aware now. Is that something you've done a lot of work on?
Just trying to work it out as I go along. But yeah, a lot of therapy down the line. Certainly when I learned how to teach yoga, that was a big process. And it has continued to be. So every time I go into something like yoga or a guided meditation, I almost always come out with another, like, oh, right, okay, this is the new thing to deal with.
Yeah, we know so little about ourselves, don't we? And it sometimes takes trauma or going through difficult times to help us discover that. But even still, there's so much more to discover.
Yeah, there really is. I'm like 4 or 5 years, I'm 7 years sober and I'm still working the damn stuff out.
Yeah. 7 years sober, massive. Are you ever tempted to have another drink?
I literally... Yuck, no,
not at all.
I'm like
Brilliant.
the smug person now. It's like, I'm going to have a massive bottle of sparkling water. I never want to touch it ever again.
Brilliant. Good for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned yoga. Is that something that you discovered as part of your sobriety?
So I'm trying to recall, actually. I think I dabbled in and out before I quit, and then it really became something I did after I left my ex-husband. So that's about 4 years ago.
Okay, and if we go back a little bit before that, then was getting sober, was that a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Yeah, I would say it became... I remember actually when I quit, I was like, this could really affect our marriage, because I felt like we wouldn't have anything in common if we didn't drink together.
Right.
But he was very supportive of me stopping and was like, do whatever you want and that's fine. But I think what became a real issue was that we were at such polar opposites. So I'm at one end not drinking at all, and he's at the other still drinking quite a lot. Yeah. And I don't know whether he felt judged or not good enough, because I remember him saying once, he was like, you're this saint and you can just not drink now.
He's probably projecting his feelings onto you almost.
Yeah. So it was quite sad, and there would be times when he would completely quit, but there was always this pull back, and it was obviously his own journey that he had to go on.
Were you judging?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's horrible. And, you know, I look back on all that time, and all I know is that we were both doing the best we could with the information we had. But I knew how awful it had been for me. So I really didn't want that to be a factor for him. And I wanted our family to be this like little sober, beautiful thing that was more interested in experiences and like living, rather than like shame and sadness and waking up feeling shit.
Yeah, essentially. And did he eventually get sober?
He did.
I'd imagine that's almost just as painful, the fact that he couldn't do it when you were together.
It's the worst. Do you know what? Driving here, I got married here.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So I was not in this building.
No, really. In this office, this very office.
Not in the building. So I got
Interesting
married
choice.
in Darlington because my dad was a vicar here at the time, ironically. And just driving back here, I was like, oh my God, I don't think I've been back to Darlington since. Or at least I don't recall, because my parents moved away quite soon afterwards. So I really felt heavy with that feeling of I made a promise here, and it's almost like I've come back to apologize. Like, this is full circle. I've written a book. I've come to speak to you about it. But I've forgotten the question now.
Just the fact that he was able to get sober,
Yes.
but not for you in the relationship you had at the time, in the family you had.
Yeah, but I think that was my sacrifice that I had to make, was that even though I did not want to leave, I was deeply in love with him and I wanted it to work. We tried everything. Like, we tried couples therapy. He tried to be sober. And there was always this underlying fear of, when is he going to fall off the wagon again? And when is it going to affect us badly? So when, something, I talk about it in the book, but something happens where I'm finally like, right, if I continue to stay, I'm just enabling him. So my cross to bear now is that I'm going to have to leave. I'm going to have to say, we're done. But in my heart, I was hoping that he would get the help he needed and come back to me.
Yeah, I remember you saying the book, and the book's fantastic. And was it quite a cathartic process writing it, or was it painful, or a mix?
It was a mix of both. It's like, what is the story that wants to come out of this? And the hardest thing was knowing how much to say. And being like, I water under the bridge, it was horrific for a long time, but now me and my kid's dad have a really good co-parenting relationship and we can be quite honest with each other. But, for a long time it was not fun. But I didn't want to throw him under the bus as such. And I don't want my kids to read it and be resentful to me for anything I've said. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to say enough, because it's more of a self-help book, really. My story's a tiny section at the beginning just to give you a flavour.
Your story's important to help people as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to give enough so that if people are in that situation, either they have issues with alcohol, their partner, not just alcohol, but addictions, or their partner does, that they're able to see themselves maybe in between the lines of what I've written and what I've said. Mm-hmm. But it made me sick for months trying to work out exactly how much to say.
I can totally understand that, because obviously I have a podcast about speaking about personal things that happen to you. I am in that not very nice stage of a divorce, but it's painful, as you say, figuring out what you can and can't say, especially when there's children involved. But it's just difficult, because you want to give the whole truth, you want to bare your soul, but you can't.
Yeah.
In my experience, I find.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you're caught up in the middle of it, because on reflection you may have different feelings and you don't want to say something you regret or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Stories are at the heart of the Personal podcast, and we're so grateful for everyone who comes on and shares them. Stories are also at the heart of a strong PR campaign. And at Harvey and Hugo, we believe that everyone's story deserves a chance to be heard. That's why we're on a mission to give you a voice amplified through the power of story. Our stories are shared in the form of press releases, social media, content marketing, videography, photography, animation, graphic design, and podcasting. Our stories aren't just heard, they're shared, watched, clicked, but most importantly, they are felt. It's this stirring of emotions that cuts through the noise to light fires within people and activate them towards your purpose. So one question for you. Are you ready to share your story? Harvey and Hugo, your voice amplified.
You mention in the book that it's the hardest thing you've ever had to do. I agree, based on my kind of situation too. Why do you think it is so hard?
I think it all depends on the reasons behind it. So for me, I was divorcing somebody who I loved, but then there was also a bit of me that felt almost free because it was such a burden at times. Like, that's not a nice thing to say, but it did feel like a heavy burden that I wasn't even aware of on the surface.
Yes.
Of just constantly wondering what fires I'm going to need to put out, who needs to be protected from what truth, and just the shame of like some of the stuff that we did back in the day and all of the drinking that I did and all the things that I'd kind of approved by doing. And that becomes quite heavy, and you've become quite, I guess, stuck in your shadows or ignoring your shadows. Like, there's a whole room full by now where you've just locked the key.
Yes.
You know, that whole Bluebeard thing, like within the psyche of yourself.
I do. No,
So
tell me about that.
Bluebeard's story is he marries this like beautiful young girl. He's a big rich man. He's got like a castle full of all these rooms, and he goes away on a trip, and he gives the girl the keys to the castle and says, you can go in any room you want, the money, whatever you want, but you can't go in that room.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously
I know what
she's like, goes in every room and then goes in the room that she's not meant to. And there's evidence on the key that she can't get rid of, like a blood stain. So when he comes back, he's like, you've been in that room. And it's meant to represent how we do it to ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have a room where, and in the room, I should say, is full of all his dead wives.
Yeah.
So he then goes and kills her and puts her in there.
Nice.
Or wants to, but she gets rescued.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that whole thing of like, we all have that Bluebeard room where we're like, don't go in that room. Whatever you do, don't go in there, because you are going to find skeletons that you do not want to see, and you might never come out again.
Yeah.
Whereas actually,
You find the
I think it's
opposite.
more like Narnia. Shine a
Set you
light
free.
on some of these things. There'll be things about yourself that you don't like, but they're not as bad as you think.
Yeah.
And on the other side of there'll be things that you thought you didn't like about yourself, and then actually you're like, oh, maybe this is the thing that will help me connect to other people and relate to them, and they'll see themselves in my story, and we can grow together and connect on a different level.
Yeah, and are you referring to things? I think you mentioned ghosts on the page in the book, which I think is really, a nice way of putting things. Is that how you kind of got around the subjects you didn't want to talk about? And I take it you still just don't want to talk about them. You've dealt with them personally.
Yeah, so I've been through like all of the therapy that I needed to deal with some of the stuff that I wasn't proud of in my past. And I guess the ghosts are just things that are not mine to tell. Not my. They happen to me, but they're not worth sharing very publicly, because they will impact on my kids and my ex-husband.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think are the hardest parts of going through a divorce?
I think it's the conflict. So on day one, actually, the hardest thing was thinking about my kids and being like, I'm pulling their life apart. And so for a long time, I wasn't upset for myself. I was upset for them.
Yeah.
And feeling incredibly guilty. So that was a bit of a shit time. But then, and I guess it's, if you're used to being quite a big people pleaser, it's when you finally go, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And having to stand up for yourself can make you feel incredibly guilty.
Especially, was it you that initiated the decision?
Yeah, I'm like, right, we're done. This is over. So I'm the bad guy. I've split up our family. I'm the one saying no. That's horrible. It's horrible to feel like you're responsible for all of that.
Yeah. And how did you handle explain the situation to your children?
So my littlest one was only 18 months. And it's now that she's 6 that she's starting to be like, what the hell happened there?
Yeah.
I wish you lived with my dad. Why are you not living with him? This is very inconvenient.
Yeah, my youngest wasn't much older.
Yeah.
She still isn't. She's just 2.5. So
Yeah.
That must be really, it's so difficult for them.
Yeah.
People think, they just breeze through it because they don't know what's going on, but they just must grow up and suddenly think, well, yeah, like you say, why aren't you together?
Yeah, I'd really like you to be. Do you think you could get together? And I'm like, oh, what about your dad's girlfriend? And she's like, she can still hang around. I'm like, no, I don't think so. So, but yes, my eldest he turned 8. And oh God, it was just gross. Having to tell him was like the worst. And my ex wanted to tell him really soon, like before I was ready.
Right.
Almost, it felt a little bit like a punishment.
Yes.
And yeah, he was really sad. And I don't really remember what we said other than we don't love each other anymore and we're splitting up, which wasn't true. You probably knew that, that's not true. That was not what was happening.
I know. It is heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking the stories you have to craft for them to make sense of it, which, sometimes are lies.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the hardest part for me, the children involved.
Yeah, it really is. And you do really, really, really have to make sure they know it's not them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because as much as it's a cliche that the kids will blame themselves, they literally will.
Yeah, if they can't find a reason, when you just say we're not happy, we're not in love, like they will think, they'll try and justify that in their mind. Because I know it, because my 5-year-old was going through it. It's like, so mummy, like, well, this happened and this, and then you could see her thinking or coming to that conclusion, well, maybe it's me. And I was like, I want to absolutely clarify. And yeah, we've both been pretty good at that, explaining it's not. But yes, bless their little souls.
I know. And you have to do your best don't ever slag your ex off to your kids, because that is the worst thing that a child can hear.
Absolutely.
Whilst also saying, but I also don't want to be with them.
Yeah.
It's
like actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. They're still a good dad. They still really love you, blah, blah, blah. But I don't want to be with them.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Do you have any advice for anyone who's kind of stuck in the depths of despair right now, going through a similar situation?
Take your time. It's my number one thing. Like, that's why I got so heavily into yoga and meditation and went on to do all the training, because you need to calm your nervous system down when you're in that fight, flight, fear, freeze, all of that, like not feeling safe. The act of breathing is the most powerful thing you can do for your nervous system and literally for everybody around you. There's apparently a study, can't give you any more information than apparently there's a study, but if women are in a room and they're breathing properly, it affects everybody else in the room.
And not if the men are.
Yeah, for some reason we've got this we know it. We're all witches.
Well, yeah, and that's a good thing. Again, that's being kind of over time classed as a bad thing. But I love the idea that we're witches. And on the last conversation, we were talking about crystals and the power there.
Nice.
And, yoga has incredible benefits. What are some of the benefits that you've experienced?
Well, it's this thing of learning how to breathe, learning how to connect back into your center and feeling safe. If you can feel safe, the impact, non-verbal impact on your children is going to be huge. Yeah, they're look at their mother and they're like, I know that you'll have male and female listeners, so men breathe as well. Yeah. But just allowing your children and demonstrating and modeling for them that you are taking care of yourself and you are breathing and you are making sure you feel safe is massive.
Okay, taking that on board, just breathe.
Yeah.
It's so easy to forget. And I know obviously we do breathe because otherwise we wouldn't be alive, but just breathe.
It's very different,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So did yoga help heal you?
It did a lot, yes. I did all of the therapeutic, CBT type stuff. But then on top of that, it was like the semantic side of the healing as well, because you can understand things logically in your brain of right, I get it. Yeah. I did the best that I could, blah, blah, blah. But it's until you feel it within your body, because we have such an incredible like neural system, and bits of your brain are actually in your belly, and all of this kind of stuff where you're like, oh right, that bit of me also needs to understand.
Yes.
So yeah, and it's not just yoga, it's like yoga with intention. It's yoga to heal.
Okay.
So every time that you're doing a class, so the type of yoga I do is called forest yoga, and you start every class with an intention, and that really helps.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. You do have a very calming presence about you. Is that something you've always had or something you've learned?
I think I probably learned that.
Okay, maybe you can teach me one day. Okay, so let's move on to dating.
Okay.
That's always a fun new experience on the other side of divorce or separation. Did you jump straight into online dating?
Do you know, I did, but almost as a retaliation.
Yeah.
And because I hadn't done any of the healing work that I needed to do, I was like, I need somebody to make me feel better, because I do not feel good about myself right now. I need that external validation. So I started dating somebody about 4 months after we split up, or 5 months. But he'd kind of started dating somebody before that. So it was a bit like, he's already, I felt so replaceable. I was like, oh God, he's already found somebody else.
Yes.
So I will find somebody too. And I think that's very common. If you're like hugely in the middle of trauma, you're like, somebody needs to fix me, because I felt so unlovable and so replaceable.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's nobody's fault. It's just one of those things. Like, it's totally up to him if he wanted to go meet somebody else. But the reaction I had was that, okay, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and the idea, I guess, something I'm learning coming out of this, is that no one should be able to make you feel that way, whether you've been together forever or whatever. You're in control of your emotions, your feelings. And I interviewed someone earlier this year, called Michelle Minikin. It's been a long year.
We're nearly at the end.
She'd written a book called Good Girl Deprogramming, another amazing book. And it said that her overall objective, and as women, we should aim to become unfuckwithable, all one word. And I just loved it. I thought, wow, yes, that's my goal. So no one can affect my emotions. I still be kind of loving, kind, not going to turn to a stone, but deep down, because I've developed that self-love, it can't be affected. I mean, I don't know if that's the impossible dream, but that's what I'm working on.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I guess one of the main things that I've learned over this period is to sit with those feelings. Like, quitting alcohol, for example. It took me like 4 years to realize that I needed to actually deal with why I was drinking in the first place. And it really does come to that point of being like, as soon as that Bluebeard door starts to creep open, and you're like, oh my God, the demons are coming to get me. And you're like, shit, where's maths? Married at First Sight, or just something so you can binge watch, and then I need the food, I need this, I need that. It's actually going, okay, I'm going to have a little look. This is really uncomfortable. I'm going to look through the door and just see what's going on and breathe through it, and then being like, oh, okay. Right now I'm feeling really sad because my kids are with their dad and I don't know who I am when I haven't got them.
Yes.
And just breathing with that. Because we're literally built to have good and bad emotions. So we kind of have to feel everything. Otherwise, we're only experiencing half of what life has to offer us.
Yeah, it's so true. And my go-to was always just work through the pain.
Because that's your addiction, right?
Yeah.
And I have a bit of that too. We all have it somewhere. It's like, oh, I'll just buy that Lululemon top because that'll make me feel better.
Yeah, our actions apparently are all driven by moving us away from discomfort.
Yeah.
So I've started journaling. Well, I started journaling back when it all happened, and that's kind of my therapy as well. I've had therapy too, but I find journaling so powerful, kind of opening that door, going through it, writing down everything you feel about it. It kind of gets it out your head and out your heart sometimes.
Yeah. And then you can do some really powerful ceremonies with that kind of thing as well, like ripping things up and burning them and making intentions and asking the universe or whoever it is that you're working with for support to move past the things that you feel are holding you back.
I've asked for plenty of that. I've been bothering the universe quite a lot.
Yeah. Don't worry, the universe loves it.
Excellent. Do you have any funny dating stories?
Oh, God.
You don't have to share.
I'm like, it's the ones where you put a lot of time and effort into getting to know somebody and then you meet them and you're like, oh, you didn't put any of what you actually look like on your profile, which is horrible. You shouldn't just judge people on how they look, but there is something about, I guess the issue is that with a dating site, you can't put your aura and your like the magic of what you actually look like in real life on there.
Yeah,
so
totally.
everyone just puts their best foot forward and but then when you meet somebody in person, you're like, oh, yeah, that's,
this is a shame.
this is a real shame.
Yeah.
And then having to awkwardly be like, no, I don't want another drink. I just want to go home.
Yeah. The thing is, like, it's so much about attraction that you just can't tell through pictures. And they don't have to be the most good-looking person in the world, from my experience.
Absolutely
Maybe
not.
I've just got low standards, but it's that attraction that you feel.
Yeah.
And you can't explain it. It's chemistry.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the way they laugh, the way they move, the way they make you feel. You can't get that across in a dating app.
No.
Which is why I gave them up.
Yes.
So in the end, I got to the point where I was like, this is not working for me. I'm repeating old patterns of trying to really be whatever they want me to be. I'm going to show, I wouldn't even mention that I don't drink in my app, in the app. I'd just be like, oh, by the way, like, I'm still fun, don't worry.
Yeah. Isn't it strange that you have to qualify that?
Yeah. And then actually I was like, oh, hang on. That needs to be number one on my profile. I'm not willing to pretend that I don't drink. And actually, I know now that I don't want somebody who drinks either because I want us to be the same.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you certainly do figure out what you want and what you don't want. And you also mentioned in the book that you discovered that you had codependency. Now, I've since looked into that, but can you define it? Because I think there'll be a lot of people that don't even realise what that is or even like if they're affected by it.
Oh, I guess for me, it was another addiction. So I am addicted to this person because I felt like my life couldn't go on without them. So, for a long time I felt like that about booze.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, hang on. I've got the same relationship with alcohol that I do with my husband. And I felt completely like I don't know how to live without them.
What's the difference then between, because I just thought that was loving someone. What's the difference?
Well, now that I have a secure attachment with somebody and we have had to navigate, even though he was everything that I wanted, we still had to navigate that whole like anxious, avoidant attachment. Now that I'm secure, I know that he's not there to complete me. I know that I would be okay if we split up, but I don't want us to split up.
Okay.
Like I want him in my life, but he doesn't complete me. We were saying this the other night. He doubles me.
Oh, nice.
So he's me times 2. So I'd be fine as a 1, but I would prefer it that we're 2.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lovely way of putting it. And do you ever have fears that you would slip back into codependent ways?
Oh, definitely. There's definitely something in my psyche that's like, please look after me. I want to be, just rescued. Just rescue me. I don't want to be a grown-up. I don't want to deal with my finances. I don't want to buy a fucking house. I want you to come and look after me. Yeah. But it's at the moments that you're like, okay, what's going on
So you
here?
recognise it.
Yeah.
And you can then take steps. What steps do you take to prevent it?
It's just the whole thing of opening the door again and being like, right, what is actually going on here? And then can I start taking baby steps towards doing this for myself?
Yeah.
Because as soon as you're like getting pissed off that you're having to blow up your own tires or buy a house on your own, it's going, but how hard is it really?
Yeah, maybe I'm codependent on my parents. This is dawning on me. I've moved here. But it's just interesting, isn't it? Just psychologically, there's so much going on and you just, you never know.
And you have to be really kind to yourself.
Yes.
Like, that's okay. Who gives a shit if you want somebody else to blow your tires up? there's a whole thing in the book about when I have to grieve my maiden, which is like the archetype within you that just wants to be rescued.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I literally had to sit down and write down all the things I didn't know I was still upset about.
Yeah.
You were meant to look after me. You were meant to blow my tires up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was promises made, wasn't there?
Yeah, but they weren't specifically like, oh, I'm going to come and rescue you from all your money troubles. But that's what like.
Yeah.
Emotionally, that was the codependence.
Yeah. Okay. I understand now. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, but I'm a big fan of outsourcing. I run an agency that outsources.
Totally.
Things, so if I need my tires doing, I'm going to outsource. It's helping someone. It's helping another business.
But the crucial thing is you could do it yourself.
Well, I couldn't, so
you definitely could. I promise.
Okay.
Call me. I'll talk you through it.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's little things like that are scary parts of getting divorced. Obviously, they're very minor in the grand scheme of things, but it's just like, I remember going. The first week, there was power cut, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but I didn't know which switches to trip and everything like that. So, but again, you learn pretty fast, don't you?
You do.
Figure it out. But I guess you just have your roles within the relationship, like you do at work. Each person is responsible for different things. You don't know necessarily what other people do, but it works as a whole.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just figuring out that. But I don't know, I feel it's like it highlights for me shame in things that I perhaps can't do, that perhaps I should be seen to do now that I'm independent.
Yeah, I guess the word should is the other one as well.
Yeah.
Like, be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
There's no, it's, you shouldn't really come into it.
Mm-hmm. No,
and as soon
absolutely.
as you hear yourself saying that, you need to go, okay, what do I need to be able to do?
Yeah, I need to go into that door, don't I?
I need to sit with these gross feelings.
Yeah. No,
But the beauty of looking at it is that it's never as bad as you think.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It takes time to, I think, sometimes discover that. But
years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's probably a process we'll go through for the rest of our lives.
Well, yeah,
but
true.
As long as you know that you've got the toolkit to go, I'll have a wander in there, but I know now that I've been in and I can come back out. Because often you feel like I can't even go in there because what if it just consumes me and I disappear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, when you're in the depths of it, it does consume you and you do disappear. But certainly I can speak that I've come out and I'll go back in, and I'm in and out of that door at the minute. But like you say, it's important to feel. I think sometimes the doors just slam shut, and I think that's just as dangerous. So how long has it been for you since you've been divorced?
So officially it was 2023, so like a year and a half.
Okay, and how long have you been separated?
4 years.
Okay, and are you happy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Very, yeah.
Are you happier?
Yeah. God, I hope so, because that was shit.
Oh, okay.
Awful. Like I say, worst thing I've ever had to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you happier than when you were happy in your marriage?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not on him, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
That's about me working out my place in the world.
Yeah.
And feeling confident that I actually do have something to offer beyond, I'll go out with him because he's really interesting, and then people won't realise I'm vacant and I've got nothing to offer.
You mentioned that in the book. Well, you're not, are you? Because you've got so much to talk about. And you've got your own podcast, your own blog, you've written a book. Yeah, it's crazy where that came from.
I think we all probably have it a bit. It's
Have
that,
hang-ups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not enough as I am. So probably, a lot of people more than others. But yeah, I was never really properly happy, which is a lot of pressure for my ex-husband to be like, oh, I'm going to rescue her. But you can't rescue somebody from something that they don't even know they're experiencing.
Yeah.
It's such a
It's
fucked
wild,
up,
isn't
weird way around things. But yeah. So I'm much happier now because of going through all of this, it's forced me to dig deep and go, okay, who are you then?
Yeah, you often hear it. I'm not quite at the stage where I'm happier, so it's just it's just a question to ask, but we're all responsible for it, aren't we? We're all responsible for our own happiness and figuring it out. And I'm really confident that I will. It's just about being honest about where I'm at now. So
yeah, and when you're in the middle of the conflict, it's just one massive horrible transition where nobody's happy.
Yeah. Well,
but you will be.
Pardon?
You will be, I promise.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure. I know. I kind of have that belief that I will be. You know, and even if it's never the same level again, I will be happy, and I am happy. You know, I've got 2 wonderful children. I've got so much to be grateful for. It's just all navigating this new change, this new life that I didn't have in mind for myself. But I'll figure it out.
That's it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But thank you so much for writing this book. First,
Pleasure.
I'll show it to the camera again. Buy it if you need to go through a divorce sober or even drunk. It's still really useful. Not saying that I'm going through it drunk, but I might turn to it. Regular feature now. On a scale of 1 to 10, you have to rate yourself at 10 really awkward things that I ask you. So,
awesome.
How good looking are you?
Oh, so I don't know, 6, 7.
Okay. How funny are you?
10. Ask my kids.
Also, how good at cooking are you?
5.
How good at singing?
6.
Drinking alcohol? Sounds like
0.
0 now, but it sounds like you were like a 10.
I range from 10 to 0.
Yeah, but firmly in the 0 category at the minute.
Yeah.
Raising children?
7. My heart's in the right place.
Do you, really controversial question, rate yourself worse at raising children because you've been through a divorce?
No, I'm much better.
Yeah.
Much better.
But for me, like, I feel shame that the family home's been broken up, so maybe I'm worse. But then you do become better, don't you? Because it's the absolute priority and focus. Not that it wasn't before, but you just you almost step up.
But you're also fully demonstrating to your kids and modeling for them what you need. Mm-hmm. Like, that's surely the best thing they can ever see and hear.
My
and
values.
As long as they are in a calm, safe, loving environment, it doesn't matter if there's 2 dads, 1 mum, grandma and granddad. Mm-hmm. Really doesn't matter. Yeah. It's all about stability and them feeling safe.
Absolutely.
So you're doing a good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's loads you could dig into on this, but this is the quick fire round. How good a friend are you?
7.
Brilliant. Intelligence levels?
7.
Kindness?
You've got to be careful, I think, with kindness, because if you step into people pleasing, it then goes back down the scale.
Yeah, you're so right. Mm-hmm.
So I would say an 8 or 9. Like, I really try my best.
Yeah, and sometimes being kind to others isn't kind to yourself.
Exactly. Sort of that's what you've got to be careful of.
Yeah, interesting. And how good at sex are you?
Depends what day of the month it is. If I'm ovulating, I'm a 10. If I'm on my period, I'm probably on a 1.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Not at the minute because there's none happening, but let's end on that.